And now on Nights with Steve Price from the 50-Up Club, Christopher Zinn.
Yes, we spoke to Christopher about the budget this time last week. Now people have been able to look right through the entire document, and it's filtered down and percolated down as to what impact it's going to have, particularly on our age demographic. Christopher, good evening to you.
Good evening, Steve. Yeah, it's actually getting hotter, not cooler, I think, this year.
I think so too. We were very quick on this program to clap on our claws onto the changes to superannuation. They're the biggest changes probably to people over the age of 55, because 55 to 65 is where these changes most impact on people.
Exactly, particularly people who are doing a transition to retirement, or, as I've put my hand up to, are seeking to top up their super in the concessional amount, which was $35,000 a year for those of us over 50. It's going to be cut down to 25. So that makes a big difference, I would argue, those who are seeking to have adequacy, as it's called, in their super before they actually give up work. I don't think we use the word retirement so much anymore. And that's what has really spooked not quite a few people, more than the 4%, which the Treasurer says is only the number of those affected.
So what sort of calls are you getting about the budget in particular?
I think it really is uncertainty. The problem is that actually the government can't explain it. Not only is there this technical argument about what is retrospective, what is not, and frankly you have to be a lawyer, I think, to understand that, because obviously members of the Cabinet don't. They've already been tripping themselves up over it. But the other point is that really those who've blown the whistle the most, those who really understand it, so it is the Australian Council of Public Sector Retirees and self-managed super owners alike. These people are really affected now, but I'd also argue that there are people perhaps in their 40s and early 50s who would not appreciate the potential, well, not just the potential, but the impact of this on their savings. So this is part of the problem with super. I've advocated before for a consumer group which is solely focused on super. There are more than 30 organisations, due to trustees, due to people who run super, around superannuation in this massive $3 trillion industry or whatever. But there's not one consumer group solely devoted to looking after the consumer interest in super. And had there been one would have hoped that they would have had the authority to actually call this and make a deliberation. Is it retrospective, isn't it? Actually looking after the consumer interest as opposed to the industry interest or the government interest.
The government keeps saying, well, what are you all worried about? This is hysteria from wealthy Australians. No one should be complaining. None of it's retrospective. What they fail to actually understand is that the people they're talking about, let's just deal with perhaps people 60 and over for the sake of this discussion. They've spent considerable amounts of money, probably annually, to get the proper financial advice to put in place their arrangements to self-fund their retirement. They're the sort of people who do not want to rely on government handouts. Many of them were born in the mid-50s and have grown up through the 60s. Most have worked their whole lives, 40, 50 years, uninterrupted employment, probably in one career, and they've done the right thing, and they've paid a considerable amount of tax. If you added up your lifetime tax, it would be a horrifying figure. And then they have a government, and it's probably a government that they've largely supported, a conservative government, just blowing up their retirement plans.
Well, exactly. And, financial planners struggling to get on top of, before the end of the financial year, what people should do then, and contacting them. I mean, it's also the point that, while these people might be rich under some definitions, it's not that they were necessarily born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They've made decisions throughout that working life to forego consumption at one stage to save at another and get a reasonable return for that. And I think to change the rules and then claim that, and again, I won't get into the argument of what's retrospective and what isn't, but again, it's what Chris Bowen said. It's not the argument over retrospectivity. It destroys confidence in the system. And, I've been speaking to younger people, and they kind of laugh at the idea of superannuation now. Not all of them, but some of them, because they actually think you'd be crazy to park your money there. You can't touch it for decades, and by the time you get to it, who knows what thresholds they will have reduced, how far, and it'll really, make it impossible to predict how worthwhile it is using that as a vehicle.
And the other fear, Christopher, of course, is, they start charging a 15% tax on money that's currently being tax-free. Once you then, the community accepts that happens, what's to stop the tax becoming 20% when at the next election or the next budget, or 25%? You just get back into this whole issue of, well, we designed superannuation as a nest egg for people, and to encourage people to put money into super, you have to tax that money at less than their marginal rate. Otherwise, why bother? You might as well just spend the money as you go along. And so if you put that doubt about the whole system in people's minds, then the system is going to end up collapsing, and you then could potentially create another mini property boom, because people know the only thing you can still rely on is, at the moment, your house is capital gains tax free. No one's put their hand on that, and you can still, if you elect a coalition government, involve yourself in investing in negative gearing property.
Well, exactly, and this is, the whole point, that super will become less attractive, then it makes other areas more attractive, and housing has often been at the top of the list, so housing affordability could get kicked for six. I mean, it's always ironic, I think, when they talk about the unforeseen consequences of policy changes like this. Of course, they're quite foreseen, but sometimes they're just discounted, or they hope that it's someone else who will have to pick up the pieces later.
So is 50UP Club do you feel that we're going to get in for some more shocks between now and the finish of this 8-week campaign?
I don't think they'd... Look, who knows? I would never make predictions, but I think the shock of what the super changes were, nobody saw coming. There were smoke signals there are going to be changes, but the fundamental redefinition of what super is, as far as many people are concerned, I think that is a massive change. Now, in terms of policy, various other policies that come out that affect people over 50, I mean, let's see. That remains. I hope there are some surprises as opposed to shocks, because we want something that's going to attract our attention, as well as making us choose who we'll vote for.
So we'll keep our eye on the 50UP Club website, because you will clearly, what you'll be doing is alerting people to these dramas as we go through.
Yeah, and what we've done is really picked some areas, and we've looked at super and negative gearing and private health insurance, so you can look and see where the parties, where they stand. We're apolitical, we don't make a call in those sense, but we seek to present those policies which impact more severely, one might say, or more beneficially in terms of the over 50, so you can look, and that might help you make your decision should you be a swinging voter.
Always a pleasure to catch up with you, Christopher. Thank you, mate. Yep. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Steve. Wilco.
Christopher Zinn.